Thank you for tuning in to the English segment on TMH. My name is Rowena and I will be providing the latest updates on the ongoing war on Tigray. Last week, Tigrayans across the UK protested in Cornwall to demand the G7 to recognise the genocide taking place in Tigray and for tangible resolutions. More specifically, the verified removal of invading forces and unfettered humanitarian access. In anticipation of the G7 summit and the topic of Tigray on the agenda, Deputy Prime Minister Demek Amakonnen accused the group of having a condescending approach and demanded they desist from these unhelpful activities. The G7 group have since condemned the atrocities taking place, including the widespread sexual violence, and called for the immediate cessation of hostilities, unimpeded humanitarian access, and the immediate withdrawal of Eritrean forces. They went on to say it is essential that there is an independent, transparent, and impartial investigation into the crimes reported and that those responsible for human rights abuses are held to account. The group called for the end of violence and the establishment of a clear, inclusive political process that is acceptable to all Ethiopians, including those in Tigray. Here is a video from the G7 protest.
We need action! We need action! Stop genocide! Stop genocide! Stop genocide! Stop genocide! G7! G7! Must act now! Must act now! G7! G7! Must act now! Must act now! G7! G7! Stop genocide! Stop genocide! Abiy Ahmed is terrorist! Abiy Ahmed is a terrorist! Stop Tigray genocide! Stop Tigray genocide! Who are we? Who are we? Who are we? What do we want? What do we want? What do we want? When do we want it? 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 22,000! 22,000! 22,000! 22,000! Women raped! Women raped! 22,000! 22,000! Women raped! Women raped! Follow me, guys, follow me. Eritrean! 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 Troops are raping our women! Eritrean 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 troops are killing civilians! Killing civilians! G7 act now! G7 act now! G7 act now! G7 act now! Ethiopian troops out of Tigray!
In a video statement, Demek Amakonnen accused unspecified members of the international community of undertaking a campaign against Ethiopia. He also said accusations against the Ethiopian government for using hunger as a weapon were an egregious falsehood. This is alongside reports this month from the UN-backed Integrated Food Security Phase classification warning that 5.5 million people in Tigray are facing high acute food insecurity, of which 353,000 are at highest catastrophic level of risk. The Ethiopian government rejected the assessment, stating that food aid had been delivered to 5.2 million people. The UN Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief has said the number of people affected by the famine in Tigray is higher than anywhere in the world and is the worst in any country since the famine that gripped Somalia in 2011. Abiy Ahmed and allied forces are wielding hunger as a weapon of war in Tigray and as a form of punishment and oppression to starve the Tigrayan people into submission. It's the worst hunger crisis in a decade, and without intervention will likely be a repeat of the 1984 famine. British Ambassador Barbara Woodward has said it's not a drought or locusts that are causing this hunger, but the decisions of those in power, and concluded that those in power are the ones that could put an end to the suffering. A key cause of the food crisis is the effect of the ongoing war, including population displacement, movement restriction, loss of harvest, and livelihood assets. The crisis is not only food insecurity, but also clean water, sanitation, and healthcare, especially disease prevention and treatment. Following this, the African Union has said it will launch an inquiry into allegations of abuses in Tigray. On Wednesday, 16th June, the African Union Human Rights Commission announced that it was beginning its investigation in Tigray and has asked for cooperation from all those involved. In response, Ethiopia's government called on the AU to immediately seize the new commission of inquiry. A statement from the Ethiopian Foreign Ministry criticized the independent inquiry as misguided and lacking a legal basis and proposed a joint probe instead. The Foreign Ministry expressed regret over the African Union's unilateral decision to appoint a panel to investigate alleged human rights violations in Tigray, under claims that the inquiry is completely outside the scope of the invitation by the government and lacks legal basis. A recent statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs claimed the AU Rights Commission had not followed the right procedure that would allow for the necessary conditions for investigation. The Ethiopian government has said that this latest move undermines the cooperative spirit of its government to formalize the modalities of stated investigation. This comes shortly after the African Commission on Human and People's Rights acknowledged the war began when Ethiopia launched a military offensive against the government of Tigray, hence dismissing the narrative perpetuated by the Ethiopian government that an attack on the Northern Command triggered the ongoing genocidal war in Tigray. The twice delayed general election, of which the Ethiopian government attributed to the COVID-19 pandemic and logistical challenges, took place this week on the 21st of June. The election took place with a backdrop of continued violence throughout the country, not least a state-led genocidal war in Tigray, violent clashes in Wallagga, Western Oromia, fighting between Afar and Somali, the Qamant and Amhara, and also extends to border disputes with Sudan. The Somali region, being the third largest in the country, experienced closure of multiple polling stations by the National Electoral Board of Ethiopia. Reports also indicate voter registration fraud and defects in ballot papers. In addition to delays in voter registration throughout the Harar region, the chairwoman of the Electoral Board said Harar and Somali regions would not take part in the election day. The Ethiopian government also excluded the Metkal zone of the Benshangul Gumuz region amidst claims of intensifying violence, alongside reports of delays in registration in the Afar region and several districts in Oromia not able to hold voting under the requirements of the Electoral Board. In addition to this, the entirety of Tigray was excluded from the election. This makes it roughly a fifth of the country's constituencies not taking part in the general election whatsoever, meaning 64 seats across the country will not be filled. The affected regions appear to be regions that have asked for their constitutional right to exercise a degree of autonomy or self-administration. Opposition leaders, some of whom used to be allies to the Prime Minister, such as Oromo Federalist Congress activist Jawar Mohammed, Baqqala Garba, Hamza Borena, are currently in prison under terrorism charges. The general election seemed to be more like a coronation for Abiy Ahmed than an election. The opposition parties participating in the election were either created by or working in collaboration with Abiy Ahmed to give an illusion of legitimacy. The European Union and the US government recently cancelled their observation mission, voicing doubts about the handling of the electoral process. It's also indicative that it doesn't meet the international standards. On the other hand, the Tigray election that took place in September 2020 was free, fair, and democratic, but ultimately served as the catalyst for the war devastating the region, where the Tigrayan people are now facing retribution for exercising their constitutional rights. The Ethiopian general election was carried out amid a war where the government is responsible for war crimes. It cannot be expected to be free, fair, or credible while egregious human rights violations continue to take place in Tigray and wider Ethiopia at the behest of Abiy Ahmed Ali. It serves as smoke and mirrors to distract the international community from the multiple offences carried out by Abiy Ahmed throughout Ethiopia. The logistical challenges and fears of COVID as reason for delay still stand today. At present, COVID transmission in Ethiopia is at its highest. It points to showmanship to appease the pressures of the international community's continued ask for democracy. In February, Finland's Foreign Minister Pekka Haavisto said he had 2 days of meetings with Abiy Ahmed and other key ministers about the growing humanitarian crisis in Tigray. He described talks in which the Ethiopian leadership said they were going to destroy the Tigrayan people, expressing a desire to wipe out Tigrayans for 100 years. It wasn't clear from Haavisto's remarks who from the administration made the comments. However, Ethiopia's foreign ministry has since dismissed the comments as ludicrous and a hallucination of sorts or a lapse in memory of some kind. This is in line with the Ethiopian government's denial and gaslighting, and thereby an extension of the violence unleashed on citizens for opposing Abiy Ahmed and his style of unitary governance. Abiy Ahmed believes this election will grant him the legal mandate to continue his campaign of terror and deprivation. However, the reality will likely mean the main political opponents, either in prison or in conflict areas, will not accept him as the elected leader of Ethiopia. It's clear his administration is resorting to political repression to preserve centralized power and Abiy Ahmed's own vision for Ethiopia. To end today's segment, here is more footage of protesters from a recent demonstration interviewed by Rita Kasai.
شمي برهان نجاش بحال.
كم تايم مزيحة؟
كاب ساوث لندن.
Jessie Baldwin.
My name is Aidan Asafa from Tigray, UK.
Well, my name is Martin. I am a journalist and researcher. I've worked on the Horn of Africa for about 30 years, and I'm pleased to be on the march. Thank you. كم تتفلتيو لما أنتي عدنا بتجراي زكاة زلوا ناي جوناسايد أكت بمنجستي إثيوبيان منجستي إريتريان نو نمقام كاب لندن وصعن تجارو فتو تجارو تأكيدنا لما أنتي لأن إنجليز منجستي نفتو تجارو زخونو حبرة زلوا عدنا زكبر زلوا قفعين من رداء سلموا سلف سوينا كم تفرقوا دس بزول ملكعو سلفنا كايدا لنا مالتي.
I'm here today because this is a genocide and the UK government needs to pay attention. We need to be condemning this. We need to be talking to the UN. We need to be invoking Article 41 and we need to make sure our voices are heard.
What do you know about Tigray?
So I'm a doctoral researcher. I research the women of Tigrayan conflict and I work specifically on the liberation war that happened in 1974 to 1991. And the roots of that liberation war are why this genocide is happening today. So that's why I'm here today and that's why I'm marching today.
What are you doing here today? Why are you marching?
We're here today to be a voice for our people back home. We've been, there's ethnic cleansing back home happening and there's a genocide and we want to be a voice for the voiceless and we're here to ask the UK government to take action. We don't want words, we want action right now because we don't want another Rwanda. Another Rwanda is happening right now and we want our voice heard.
Why have you come on the march today?
Well, it's a basic question of justice. I mean, you can't see thousands of people being killed, women being randomly raped, not randomly actually, on the orders of a government and not do something. That would be appalling. And the suffering of the people of Tigray is just immense, and I think it's absolutely vital that everybody must step up and do their bit.
I agree. Okay,
كم تزفلت زي عدنا زقبر زلوا قفعي شدشتور حجير إيو جنت international community كم تزقبع react يقبرن زلوا slowly to process جن نحنا منجليز نجستوين منجست إنجليز مسناي إثيوبيا منجستي زلوا ورخبي كاستوعل زجوروا حجزات إني أبتقراني زكاة زلوا ناي جنوسايد سراح
ኮንትሪቢዩቲንግ ፋክተር ከይህልዎ ንሱ ዎች አውት ክገብሩ ናይ ኤርትራ ወታደራትን ናይ ሚሊሻ ምሓሩን ካብ ትግራይ መሬት ክወፁ ኣብ ትግራይ ዝግበር ዘሎ ግፍዒ ጠጠው ክብል ኤክስፔክት ይገብር ማለት እዩ።
Thank you, Jesse. What should the world do to stop this war?
The world needs to raise its voice. We keep saying never again. We say never again Bosnia. We say never again Rwanda. And it should be never again Tigray. Enough is enough. The UN needs to invoke Article 41. We need to have sanctions on Ethiopia. We need to ensure Eritrean troops are withdrawn from Ethiopia. The International Criminal Court needs to be invoking investigations into Abiy Ahmed and Nazayas. The world needs to pay attention. The world needs to raise its voice.
What would you want the UK government to do specifically? What outcomes do you want from today?
Possibly to demand a ceasefire, to get humanitarian aid for the war to stop, really, the genocide to stop. That's all we need.
What do you think the world should do? What should everybody be doing now?
There's only one thing ordinary people must do. They must get out and move from their communities and engage with the wider community and ask for support. So whether you go and see your priest and ask him to speak for you, or whether you go at the mosque and ask them to speak for you, or whether you write to your member of parliament, or whether you speak to your trade union, act. Don't just sit in your community and say how bad it is. You have to reach out to the wider democratic community if you're living in Britain, and make sure that the position of the British government becomes one of action, not just words.